Well, Dr. Wolfe, it's a privilege and an honor to have you here, and a great opportunity, I think, for everybody to really learn how important muscle health is in our overall health and wellness. You know, when we talk about health, we think of brain health, we think of digestive health, bone health, but we don't hear a lot about muscle health. Why is this not a more popular subject?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that people will normally say, I'm real happy to be here, but of course, that's because it's expected. But I really am, and I just like to, I'll get to the question, but I want to give a little personal background here, that for most of my career, I worked literally in the basement. When I was at Harvard, my lab was in the basement. My office was, they'd cleared out the mops and stuff from the janitor's storage, and never saw the sun for days and days. And then the same thing for years, publishing a lot of papers and feeling like they were getting stacked up in the library and nobody was ever really paying any attention to them. And that was what really motivated me to, in 2006, go to the Center for Translational Research to establish a Translational Research Center in Arkansas Medical School. The reason being that through all the research I did, kept coming back to the point that unless it can translate to something that you put on somebody's kitchen table and they drink and it actually does them some good, that it's kind of just a pure academic exercise. And so these kind of events where I have a chance to try to translate some of this research that's been done over the last 40 years to help people really improve their quality of life, it's really, it's why I changed where I worked and the direction I was working in. So I truly am happy to see such a great crowd and hope that when we're finished you'll have lots of questions. Regarding muscle, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to answer the question directly because muscle's been kind of a focus for me since I was in high school, so it's incomprehensible to me how nobody can appreciate how important muscle is. My life has been very myocentric. But I think but the main point is that people are really think of muscle purely with your test of standing up out of the chair. And I think that the other things that were briefly introduced that we'll talk more about is that there is such a wide range of functions that amino acids and muscle are important in regulating that are underappreciated, that really the new focus in taking care of yourself and providing some benefit to your own health care is going to focus on muscle health.
Well, as you mentioned, amino acids, you know, up until a couple of years ago, I really didn't know much about it. I'd heard the name, and we're going to be talking a lot about essential amino acids. So to get our audience up to speed, can you explain exactly what is an essential amino acid?
Sure. We have, the proteins in our body are made up of amino acids, and the building blocks of those proteins are a combination of what we call essential and non-essential amino acids. There are 20 total amino acids. There are 9 that we call essential and 11 that are non-essential. The distinguishing feature is that the essential amino acids cannot be produced in the body. So the only way you can get the essential amino acids is by your dietary intake. And in fact, the essential amino acids are the only macronutrients, meaning like carbohydrate, fat, and so forth. They're the only macronutrients that are required in the diet. You could live without any other intake, including the non-essential amino acids.
So this is like a form of food.
It is. So when you eat a steak, it's composed of a whole different array of amino acids, including essentials and non-essentials. The non-essentials you don't really need to eat because the body can produce all we need. The essentials cannot be produced in the body and can only come from the food that you eat.
So we're going to talk about MyoHealth, which is an essential amino acid complex supplement. Why can't we just get essential amino acids from our food alone and diet?
Well, of course, we do get essential amino acids from food. I think one of the major findings in my work over the last 40 years has been that it's actually very hard to get an optimal amount of essential amino acids, that the various processes in the body, and particularly focused on muscle, but in other areas as well, require the optimal intake of essential amino acids really makes it impractical to reach that goal just with your dietary intake. For example, if you consider very high quality proteins like meat or dairy, that they're still at least 50% fat or more. The plant-based proteins are generally 70% or more non-protein source in that food source. So when you just do the arithmetic of adding up the amount of protein you need to eat for an optimal intake and the total calories associated with the food products, you have no room for anything else. And it's just not practical. So that's why the idea of eating what you can and then supplementing that with the key ingredients is really the most practical and efficient way to accomplish proper amino acid nutrition.
So especially if you're not like an athlete that's exercising all the time, you would be taking in a lot of calories to get the essential amino acids you need.
And especially as you get older, there are other factors that come into play as well. You know, your taste change, cost, preparation time, chewing, all these factors kind of work against you in terms of getting proper nutrition, protein nutrition. And so you tend to go to foods that are too high in non-protein calories, and then your total caloric requirement isn't that high because you're not, like you say, you're not out there running 10 miles a day. So it just doesn't add up. You can't get as many essential amino acids as you need just through your normal diet. Although I encourage, and part of what's in the building blocks of life is to optimize your protein nutrition, but it's still not going to be enough to get the optimal amount.
Speaking of the book, I was reading it, and one of the things that really caught my attention is a statement you made, and you're a pretty smart guy and all, so I paid close attention to this. But you state that you believe that essential amino acids could have the greatest impact on human health. Why did you say that?
Well, the basis for that statement is at least 30 to 35 years of scientific research determining the factors that are important in maintaining and optimizing muscle health and the importance of muscle health in our overall condition. And I think that the second point is really just as important as the first, and that is that it's becoming much more recognized that optimal muscle health and function is a crucial component of particularly as you grow older, and that the amino acids, and particularly the essential amino acids, are the key to optimizing that. And so as this becomes more incorporated into our daily lives, I think it's going to have a dramatic impact on our own ability to manage our health care.
And we're going to get into some of those details about how it impacts all the different components of the body. Let's just talk about muscle health in general. As we age, we all know we lose muscle, and you can be more severe and turn into adult onset muscle loss. It can be as severe as sarcopenia. What are some of the greatest concerns with losing muscle, especially as we get older? What are some of the conditions that we need to be aware of?
The concerns really hinge on where you are. If you couldn't get out of your chair, then that pretty much relegates you to a nursing home, and to get a glass of water, you got to have somebody bring it to you. So that to the extreme, I think we can all recognize the danger, the problem, and the loss of quality of life with that. At the other end of the extreme, you might be playing golf every day and upset that you're not hitting the ball anywhere near as far as you used to. And then you have all extremes in between. But the thing to remember and to be very, very aware of, if nothing else, is that it's a plateau. And you may be going along thinking you're doing just fine with your muscle strength. If you're not playing golf or doing something else that kind of quantifies your muscle function, you probably think you're doing just fine because your daily activities are going just fine. But as soon as you have some event like serious illness, a surgery or something, and you get just a little bit of an acceleration of muscle loss, you go over this threshold, and all of a sudden your entire quality of life is impacted. So that you really need to be aware that the time to do something about this is before you reach this point of falling off the ledge. I like to use the analogy of closing the barn door after the horse gets out, of like, okay, gee, now I can't get out of a chair, I better do something about it. The time to do something about it is while you're still active and still can make the changes that will enable you to avoid ever falling off that plateau.
So it's safe to say that muscle plays a significant role in the quality of life, especially as we age.
I think it's the most, as you age, I think it's the #1 key factor in quality of life.
Okay, we're going to get a little technical, so you got to go easy on our audience here with the technical terms. We're going to talk about protein synthesis. Explain how protein synthesis works and why it's such an important function to having and living healthy.
Sure. I think that I'll kind of go back in history a little bit. In the early 1900s, up until that point, the thought was that you had a certain amount of protein in your body. And protein is like about 70% of the, excluding water, it's about 70% of your body. So it's a major part of your body. And the thought was that you just were born with that amount of protein. As you got to a certain age, then that's what you had. But it was discovered at that time that really this wasn't true, that there was a constant process of turnover of protein, meaning that the proteins you had in your body were being broken down and new proteins replacing them. And the importance of that protein breakdown and protein synthesis is that older proteins that aren't functioning as well are selected to be degraded and replaced by newer, better functioning protein. And this is, nowhere is this more important than the muscle, because the central aspect of training and getting stronger is a faster muscle protein turnover, so that you break down the muscle fibers that cause the forced contraction, you break down the old ones and you replace them with new ones. So you see in the nutrition literature a great focus in muscle on protein synthesis, or muscle protein synthesis, and that's because that's really the key metabolic basis for maintaining your muscle mass and your muscle strength, is that new protein, muscle protein is produced to balance what is always going to be continuously lost.
And this is going on 24/7 every day.
Absolutely.
Okay, so in your book, you also draw a very interesting comparison. It was one with a subject that was a 700-pound man that was hospitalized for extreme obesity, and probably his system was shutting down. And they basically did not feed him any food for a year. And you compared that to a food protest that took place in Ireland many years ago, and where they were drawing blood from these subjects, and many of these subjects were actually dying off faster than the man that lived in the hospital for a year with no food. Explain that. Tell us about that story and why that comparison is so important.
Yeah, because I think that the point to understand is that the muscle serves as the reservoir of amino acids in our body. And by that I mean that it's the only tissue in the body that has enough extra protein that you can afford to lose a little bit of it and you'll still be okay. If you think about the skin, for example, if you went a couple of days without eating and the rate of breakdown of protein was greater than the rate of synthesis, you start losing your skin. That's not going to work out. And the same thing with your heart and brain and so forth. That there are a lot of essential tissues and organs that have to have a constant supply of amino acids to maintain their viability and that are central to life. Muscle can afford to lose a little. So what happens over the course of the normal day is when you are not eating food and you're in a post-absorptive state, the muscle breaks down and releases amino acids into the blood. So then there's a net loss of muscle because breakdown is faster than synthesis. Muscle breaks down and releases those amino acids into the blood. Then those amino acids can be taken up by other tissues and maintaining the adequate function. And what happens with, the reason these two were so interesting in comparison is that this 700-pound man actually had a big muscle mass as well because he's so fat that just to move around he built up a big muscle reserve. So he had enough muscle that he could go a whole year without eating and maintain normal blood glucose levels.
They just gave him what, vitamins and minerals?
Vitamins and minerals and water for a year, but he had enough muscle that he could maintain, and as long as those amino acids were maintained, he was okay. The Irish hunger strikers were pretty skinny to begin with, and what happened was by 40 days they had run out of muscle on average, And as soon as that happened, the blood levels of amino acids dropped, and they died within a day of when the amino acid levels could not be dropped, started to drop. So it shows the importance of muscle in maintaining the blood levels and how important the regulation of amino acids are. It's the most important thing. You hear a lot about the blood glucose, blood lipids. It's only the drop in amino acids that is actually lethal. It's the only thing in the blood that a disruption is actually lethal, and we have to have maintained to survive.
Muscles basically are keeping us alive.
Absolutely. That without this process of the muscle reserve, we would not be able to survive.
Interesting. So what do essential amino acids do for your body besides the basics, strength, balance, mobility? You talked a little bit about it, but let's go into some of these specific areas. You talk about blood lipid levels.
There's a process in the body where the liver is the central organ for producing fat. And the way the body normally works is that fat is packaged up and surrounded by protein and released into the blood. And this is known as VLDL. And so when you see your blood tests and you see VLDL, that's what you're looking at, is the fat that's been in the liver that's come out into the blood. Well, the VLDL will go up or down depending on how much comes out of the liver and how well the fat can clear it. And essential amino acids are crucial in both aspects of that, because the proteins involved in getting the fat out of the liver and taking it up in the peripheral fat where it belongs are both proteins that do that. So that the essential amino acid therapy will actually decrease VLDL, will decrease LDL, and increase HDL. And those are all related to the specific proteins that are involved in regulating those blood lipids.
So obviously, not just the blood lipid levels, the liver itself is healthier.
Absolutely. We showed in a study of otherwise pretty healthy elderly people, but they did have insulin resistance. They had an elevated liver fat. And when you're over 65, the predominant drug for liver fat is called fenofibrate and has all kinds of side effects. And most geriatricians will not prescribe it. The essential amino acids actually reduced liver fat by 50%. In fact, a greater reduction than the cohort that had the fenofibrate treatment. So that we know that liver health and blood lipids can be directly impacted by EAAs.
Okay, so let's talk about one of the most important muscles in our body, right? Our heart. How do EAAs impact our heart or our cardiovascular health?
Well, really in multiple ways, but first of all, recognize that the heart's a muscle. So just as the essential amino acids are important in breaking down, replacing the broken down, not so well functioning muscle proteins in the skeletal muscle, it's true in the heart as well. So as we get this process of protein turnover increase in the heart, you increase the ability of the heart can contract. This can be a direct benefit in heart failure and other circumstances, particularly as you get older, where the heart is just not contracting the way it should. If we consider another aspect of amino acid therapy is the pressure against which the heart has to pump blood out, or the blood pressure. And the principal regulator of blood pressure is nitric oxide, and that becomes deficient, particularly as you get older. And so supplementation with arginine in particular is the precursor for the production of nitric oxide, and this can have a direct effect on lowering blood pressure and improving the regulation of blood flow so that the amount of blood going to different tissues in the body is in sync with the requirement for those different tissues. So that there are multiple ways that the heart can be benefited from EAAs. And this is reflected by just the overview that large epidemiological studies with even as many as 60,000 people have shown that there's a direct relation between the heart muscle strength and function and the heart function and heart disease and events from cardiovascular disease. And this is all mediated through the fact that those healthy muscles provide an amount of essential amino acids that maintain these processes.
And for active people or athletes, this nitric oxide production is good for endurance?
Yeah, the nitric oxide is released when you start exercising in the muscle tissue, and it makes the blood vessels expand so that you get a targeted delivery of blood, which brings the oxygen and substrates necessary to produce the energy to do the exercise. So this is why nitric oxide has become a popular nutritional supplement, but it's really rather limited to take nitric oxide because it has a very fast turnover. So you take it and it'll have a boost for a few minutes, but then it's going to be gone. Whereas with increasing the arginine level, it goes up for a few hours, so you have a sustained effect over a much longer period of time.
Metabolism, impacts on metabolism.
Well, I think, you know, we heard a little bit about diabetes and saw the picture of the sugar. I think probably almost everyone in this room has been told that they need to be concerned about their blood sugar. If not, that if it's okay now, that it's likely to be heading in the wrong direction sometime in the future, because almost 70% of people over the age of 65 have elevated blood glucose levels. And the blood glucose level really is the sort of clinical yardstick of diabetes and the metabolic syndrome which leads to diabetes. So we really need to be concerned with the blood glucose level. The muscle is important in two ways of regulating the blood glucose level. The muscle is the major site of uptake of glucose from the blood. So a paper I wrote several years ago called The Underappreciated Role of Muscle in Health and Disease pointed out that diabetes is a disease of muscle function, and that the entire basis for your blood level going up is the muscles are no longer as effective in clearing glucose from the blood. So that as you improve your muscle function, you absolutely increase the ability to take up glucose from the blood and maintain that normal glucose level. And it also prevents your blood glucose from falling between meals, because as it releases the amino acids, those amino acids can be converted to glucose in the liver. So both going up and going down, the muscle plays a key role in regulating the glucose. And in fact, what the best treatment for diabetes is exercise, because exercise strengthens your muscle, it increases the ability to clear glucose. So really, the diabetes would be number one on the list that you should keep in mind of your health benefits of maintaining proper muscle function and strength.
This will be for the ladies out there that are getting a little older and dealing with hormonal changes. Any impact on that from essential amino acids?
I think that the key thing to keep in mind with hormonal therapy, and this is true not just for women but men, because testosterone therapy has become popular. The hormonal replacement therapy was really popular until about 10 years ago. A large study reported increased incidence of cardiovascular events with hormonal therapy. With regard to women, that's obviously a concern. With regard to men, testosterone does improve. You lose testosterone as you get older. As you have a testosterone replacement, you can gain both physical strength and libido. You can improve your personality, and so some of those aspects the wives are happy about. Yeah. But the point is that it comes at a price, because the prostate cancer is so common in older people, and in fact, most men over the age of 75 will die with prostate cancer. Maybe not because of prostate cancer, but prostate cancer is obviously a major concern. And the first line of treatment for prostate cancer is a testosterone blocker, because the testosterone not only is stimulating the growth of your muscle, but it's stimulating the growth of specifically stimulating the growth of your prostate. So my philosophy has been really to try to sidestep these pharmacological approaches to alleviating aging. If you insist on doing it, and growth hormone is another one which is really expensive and really pretty much worthless. So I really am advocate of not doing that. But if you're set on it, keep in mind, and we did these studies in the burn children, where we were trying in any way possible to overcome their tremendous stress by giving them hormones that would amplify their response, and that with hormonal therapy, amino acids will amplify the effect. So if you are taking testosterone and you take amino acids, you will get a much bigger effect than just with the testosterone alone. We have no data on hormonal therapy in women. We probably wouldn't really expect an interaction effect there other than the EAs are still going to be beneficial. But the theme I go through in this book is that if you maintain your balance and optimize your amino acid protein nutrition, there's no reason to be taking the hormonal therapy. And I'm not a fanatic against medicine or anything, but just realize when you take any hormone, they're all related in the body, and you will have effects on every system in your body with hormonal therapy.
Good to know. Well, I know you're an active guy, and we'll talk a little bit later about some of the things that you've accomplished, but I know that you've had injury yourself, and including a hip replacement. I believe you've had some knee surgeries to some degree. In your book, you talk about how essential amino acids can help with illness and recovering from injury. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, that's part, I think a lot of my surgeries have been because of athletics. Not entirely, but it would certainly be a good candidate for, I've had 7 orthopedic surgeries, so it's a good candidate for the explanation for some, if you hear about all I've done. But it's always had the same pattern, but as I've gotten older, the hip replacement really was where it hit home. And that is that it's really tough to get back after surgery. And a lot of this is more of a pep talk than nutrition. You know, we did a study which was very pronounced with hip replacement, where we gave half of the subjects that had hip replacement essential amino acids, and had a very significant decrease in the time to recovering back to a level of fitness that enabled them to maintain normal daily activities. But part of it also is that you have to have faith that you will eventually get back if you stick with it, because it's so demoralizing to come back from these events. And realize that as you get older, like with my hip surgery, I probably lost 10 pounds of muscle, even though I was taking amino acids, just from the stress and from the lack of exercise, so that it really is hard to come back. And that this is why after any serious event, whether it be pneumonia or some other problem, even something like chronic pain causes a loss of muscle. And that it's really tough to reverse it, and you have to really stick to it. But essential amino acids are the key. They are the metabolic basis for recovery, so that it has to incorporate whatever your PT is or recovery. It has to incorporate the building blocks of the protein, because that's how you're going to recover, is to rebuild your protein.
Tissue that's recovering. Correct?
Exactly. That when you have a hip surgery, they cut. If you've seen it in person, everything's cut. Your muscles are cut. You have to regrow muscle tissue, and that is the definition of what we're talking about, of stimulating muscle protein synthesis. So that it's really the surgical intervention is the prototypical circumstance where you can't really recover without adequate EAA nutrition.
All right, so we've had MyoHealth on the market now since mid-May, and we're getting customers there's a wide variety of benefits that they're reporting on. Better skin, better hair, better nails, more energy, better sleep, even increased libido. What are in the essential amino acids? Is all these benefits due to just better protein synthesis?
Well, everything you ticked off there, other than the sexual performance, involves protein synthesis.
Okay.
I'd like to loop that.
That's nitric oxide blood flow.
I'd like to loop that into protein synthesis, but we have to attribute that to the blood flow. And as we said, that this increasing the arginine level increases the blood flow. So it's really the exact same action as Viagra. But the other things, everything you ticked off there is a protein. The skin is protein. Your nails are protein. All of these things are protein. And with regard to sleep, the amino acids serve as neurotransmitter precursors. So, and for some of them are actual neurotransmitters. So, one of the things is I've done all these studies in so many different respects, going back 30 or 40 years, on the importance of amino acids. it's easy to understand if you think about the fact that the only required nutrients in our diet, why that it's possible that it affects so many systems. But what I was told, and this is one of these things that you have to really go through, what's the basis for all this, and realize how common it is, because I was told you could never have a product and advertise all these things because nobody would ever believe it.
True, right.
Yeah, I mean, what's going to affect all these things? But realize we're dealing with a fundamental nutritional process of the body that impacts every part of the body, and that's why the amino acid formulation is not one specific amino acid or two or three that target one particular goal. The essential amino acids play a role in every physiological function of the body, so that while we're focusing on muscle, we have to derive a formulation which is also still performing all the other duties of the amino acids, and there are many, and all these things you've ticked off are all things that are constantly going on. And just because you're worried about muscle doesn't mean that these other things aren't also going on at the same time.
It's all related.
It's all related, and that's why we focus, and it's taken years to develop this profile that optimizes the availability of each individual amino acid in accord with its demand.
So your research in human physiology and metabolism has been going on for almost 50 years. You said a little bit about it, but tell us how it got started.
Well, the start, I don't know if I really call it research, but I was in the 9th grade and was a basketball player, but way too skinny. I thought I could make the varsity, but as soon as we started practice, I was just getting pushed around because I grew to this height when I was in the 8th grade. So,
wow.
You know, I thought I was going to be pretty tall. Never kept going, but which now I'm kind of glad for. At the time, I was thinking I was going to be a lot bigger than I turned out to be. But in any case, I was only 160 pounds, and it just was not enough. And I was really at a loss for how to put on muscle. There just was so little information about how to. And a lot of you may be familiar with the fitness guru Jack LaLanne, and Jack LaLanne actually started his exercise business in a gym a couple of floors below my father's office in downtown Oakland. And so he had me over there, and I was lifting weights, and he believed in nutrition, but he didn't have any clue as to I was taking wheat germ oil and gagging that down, and to this day I've never understood why I did that, but it was a indication of dedication, and a green sort of slurry that was just left you with a horrible breath for the rest of the day. But beyond that,
so the dating came later on in high school.
There were I was not at the senior prom, and but when I went to Cal, I took a class from a guy who subsequently became quite a prominent physiologist. And I realized that the key to doing this is understanding physiology, but that there was so little known about muscle. And we knew all of the research at the time related to exercise was on heart rate and the cardiac function and other aspects of oxygen consumption, but nothing about how muscle was actually regulated. And in fact, we published the first study, which was in 1980, that showed amino acid had any impact on muscle. The mantra at the time, which was in the major book on protein nutrition, was that amino acids had no effect on muscle. So, we all...
If you're a researcher, this is relatively new science.
It really is. If people have forgotten, when you see a whole shelf in Walmart of protein products and everything, you think, well, we've always known about this. It wasn't even known when I started this work that amino acids or protein had any impact on our muscle. So we've come a long way, and it's just been gratifying to see that it really has sort of panned out as being important. So.
Well, long story short, go on and brag a little. So you went into the Air Force, and then you went into the MBA.
Well, I was actually in an Air Force program, and that was. What happened was when I played basketball at Cal, and I actually also lettered in golf and track as well. So it's kind of an unusual 3-sport letterman, but it wouldn't be possible nowadays to do that. But that's what I did, and so sports were very important to me. And I was drafted by the Warriors, and I made the team and started the season, and then was drafted by the military. This was the Vietnam era. and opted for a research program through an Air Force research program in physiology. And that's really where I started the real training. But it gave me the tools, but it wasn't until I got my first job, which was at the Harvard Medical School, and the focus was severely burned children. And my research had been in cardiovascular work, and that they were concerned about that. That was at the time what people were looking at. But I looked at these children that had these enormous livers, and you could literally see the muscle wasting away from day to day, where the way the severe burns are treated is the burn skin's cut off right down to the muscle level, and then what little skin is left is expanded, so it's like a mesh. And they put the mesh on and it eventually grows in. But you can see the muscle fibers, and you could see these muscle fibers shrinking on a day-to-day basis. The catabolic stress was so much. So that survival was really tough in those days, and it was two things. One, they had so much fat in the liver, and they lost so much muscle. And so my focus became entirely, how can we slow down this loss of muscle and decrease the liver fat? And everything really stemmed from there. I ultimately ended up focusing on muscle in all ranges. I worked as a consultant for the U.S. Olympic Committee for 20 years, so all range from these severely burned children that couldn't even walk to Olympic athletes. So I think I developed an understanding of every level of muscle performance, and why it's so important to be able to get out of a chair, and why it's so important to be able to lower your time in the marathon by 1 minute over a 2 hour, 20-minute time period. You know, it's all relevant, and I think it's really been a tremendous opportunity to have all these different experiences.
Well, you must be very gratified that what kind of started off as this personal venture to improve yourself is now helping so many people.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really kind of a dream where your hobby or your interest, your fun interest, turns into a lifetime work. So it's really never felt like, well, that's why I probably should be retired now, but I have no intention of retiring, because it's still really my hobby.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, a lot of people, you know, we hear all these great things and all these benefits, and, you know, sometimes like it's too much to believe. So let's talk about the research. You've published over 600 peer-reviewed research papers. According to Google, they've been cited over 50,000 times by other researchers. Why are they so interested in your research?
Well, I think two things. One of which is that my research from the square one is focused on practical outcomes. The goal was to improve survival in severely burned children initially, and then has expanded to a variety of circumstances. But the research has all been in human people, and outcomes are the important aspect. But the problem has been, how do you study muscle metabolism in intact people that you can't really do much? And so for a number of years, I developed methodologies that hadn't been used before that enabled us to actually quantify rates of protein synthesis and breakdown. And so that this gave us a unique ability to have insight into the factors that regulated muscle protein. And so for a number of years, really, my lab was the only lab doing these kind of studies. Now they've become, I started a course in 1990 on teaching these methods, and we've had people from 25 countries and every state in the country come every year to learn how to do these technologies, so that this methodology is spread all over the world now. But at the time, it really wasn't, nobody else was doing it. So it was kind of an open field in terms of groundbreaking studies, because it all stemmed from the fact that we could make measurements that nobody else could make. And so that was really, I think, the basis for why it kind of caught some traction throughout the scientific world.
Well, with that much research, obviously it takes money to do research. We know that just on this essential amino acid complex that's in MyoHealth that we're talking about today, you were able to receive $20 million in research. How is that possible?
Well, I think that there were two fundamental things. Of course, that wasn't all in one big lump sum, but
you had to work for that.
Yeah,
huh?
well, and it didn't trickle back to me very directly, but but it did enable the work to be done. I mean, the reality is that research is expensive, particularly in human subjects. the process of funding is you apply for grants and then your peers review it and they're ranked and the top few percent get the funding. I think that coming back to the fact that we were studying human subjects and patients and people that really needed to know the answer tomorrow as to what sort of nutrition would be optimal was really the key. That we were not only doing measurements that people weren't doing, but we were answering questions that people were really asking. We weren't counting angels on a pinhead, which is what a lot of the funded research is. Like maybe someday in the future this could be used. This was, here's a patient, here's an athlete, what is the most effective way to improve their performance or to help them get out of bed and things like that.
So you got the funding. Obviously, I believe now you're up to 25 individual human clinical studies. Let's talk about some of those. One was with NASA, the space program. Wanted help improving their astronauts' performance. Tell us a little bit about that study.
Yeah, the problem with spaceflight is that with lack of gravity, you have no resistance. So the muscles are not working. They're just completely at rest. And as a result, there's a lot of muscle loss. And in fact, the muscle loss is so severe that that's the #1 limitation for why there's never been an adventure to Mars, because the muscle loss, we can calculate the muscle loss would be so much that they couldn't function to fly back. They'd have no muscle strength to operate the spacecraft. And now you think, well, optimal nutrition, but then you have logistical issues. There's food prep and supply of food that would last a year. And every gram that goes on a spaceflight has important value. So the goal was to have the biggest bang for the buck, the most potent anabolic agent to maintain muscle mass while at a complete inactivity. And we used a model, a ground-based model of complete bed rest, and this was a month of volunteers staying in complete bed rest, never out of the horizontal position. And they get a rate of muscle.
For how long?
Well, our studies were a month. A lot of the NASA studies go for 90 days, but this is for a month. And these individuals lose muscle at about the same rate as they lose it in space. And we were able to show that the supplementation with EAAs almost completely eliminated the loss in muscle strength and function that occurred over that 30 days. We repeated this study, not for spaceflight, but for but for the fact that older people are routinely put in hospital bed for 10 days, and that the loss of muscle in bed rest in elderly over 10 days was more than in the younger people for 30 days. And again, the EAA supplementation was able to prevent the loss of muscle. And the progress in actual spaceflight has been slow, and it's kind of a real tragedy in the slowness, because our process was then put into the spaceflight of the Challenger, which was the one that blew up.
Yeah.
And so that side of the story has had a tragic side to it, but we were able to continue that, and in fact, John Glenn was one of our subjects, and so we anticipate, it's a government operation, so things go very slowly, but we do anticipate that this is going to be incorporated into their spaceflight. And I should say that where I was just this last week was at the U.S. Army. It's called Arium, which is the base for providing nutrition for special operations, and that they're also very seriously considering incorporating essential amino acids, because again, it has to be lightweight, it has to be easily transported and being able to be maintained, so that it's really an ideal supplement for special operations, and hopefully we'll be getting that study going soon as well.
I think I know where to get some.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Okay, and correct me if I don't get this right. So you did another study where you were taking human subjects at rest and measuring the protein synthesis success rate, and you were able to achieve a 141% increase. When you took a different set of human subjects, maybe the same, but they took it after exercise, you were able to increase it by 290%. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the things that comes through this over and over, and I will always emphasize, and that is that there is no substitute for exercise. And what the exercise does is really prime the muscle to respond to the amino acids. Now, you can't make something out of nothing. So if you go in the gym and lift weights and really do a big workout, if you don't have extra amino acids available, there's nothing to make the muscle out of. Nothing much is going to happen. But when you take amino acids after you do a workout, all the molecular mechanisms in the muscle that activate the whole process of protein synthesis are really primed, ready to go. They just need the fuel. When you provide that, you get a much bigger response. So realize that we haven't talked really about exercise in this at all, but no matter what the form of exercise, you will amplify the amino acid effect, and you will never achieve really your optimal protein, muscle health and function if you don't incorporate some sort of exercise into your daily activities. And you will amplify the benefit of the exercise by taking amino acids after you do the exercise, and just as you will amplify the effectiveness of the amino acids by doing exercise. So the two work together.
But in the book that everybody's going to receive, Building Blocks of Life, you mentioned that this doesn't have to be like crazy strenuous exercise, that you can get a lot of benefit even just from minimal consistent exercise.
Yeah, and the reason for that is just a little physiology, and that is that whatever exercise you do increases the blood flow to the muscles. And so it kind of shunts the blood away from the intestinal organs and other tissues that don't really need extra oxygen for exercise. So you get a bigger increase in blood flow to the muscle. What happens then when you take your essential amino acids after exercise, the blood flow is going to the muscle. So you get a greater proportion are going to go to the muscle. Now, if you do a more strenuous exercise, you activate all these initiation factors that are molecular things that will give you a bigger response. We know that you're not going to get the same amount of muscles walking the mall versus going to the gym and pumping iron. But it will still benefit you because you're going to get that increase in the blood flow going to the muscle. You're going to deliver the amino acids to the muscle, and it's going to be a help. But
it's probably not just the muscles. Isn't the rest of the body benefiting because the muscles are delivering the aminos to the bloodstream, and the bloodstream's carrying those to the...
Well, eventually, absolutely. In this period immediately after exercise, where you're taking the essentials, what's happening is that it's all going into the muscle. As soon as you go into the post-absorptive state, now that you've had more muscle built up,
you got a bigger reservoir.
Yeah, you got a bigger reservoir,
yeah.
Exactly.
Very interesting that the muscles play such a huge role in our overall health.
Yeah, I mean, it was not. I can't really criticize people for not understanding that, because I didn't understand that for a long time. That we're really dealing with more than just performance.
Right.
But the more you get into it, the more you realize that your whole quality of life hinges on your muscle health.
Okay, another study for all you whey protein users out there. Very popular form of protein that people use, especially in the bodybuilding world. There's a study that says that the patented essential amino acid complex was 3 times more effective than whey protein isolate. How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, the conclusion is by direct measurement, so it's a fact. And it's been reproduced in labs all over the world. So we know that it's a fact. The reason for it is twofold. One of which is that whey protein consists, well, first of all, whey protein is not pure protein. It has carbohydrate with it. Anywhere, if it's whey protein isolate, it's 10%. It might be, if it's just whey protein, it'll be 30% carbs, which is unappreciated, but that's a little bit of the fact. But the main issue is that whey protein has a whole combination of essentials and non-essentials. The non-essentials are not necessary. That's why they're called non-essentials. So that you got a tip off there that they're not the key part of the protein. So that so right off the bat, half of what you're taking with whey protein really has no function at all in terms of muscle protein. The second aspect, which means that you will probably never get to the same level with the whey protein as with the EAAs, is that the profile of the individual amino acids in the essential amino acid mixture has been developed over many studies and many years of work to be optimal to maximize the stimulation of muscle protein. If you take pure EAAs in the form that they're in whey protein and compare it to the other formula, you get a doubling with just the formulation, so that the profile of the individual amino acids is half of the reason that it's more effective than whey, and the inclusion of the non-essentials with the whey. So in the one case, if it was just the non-essentials, you could take enough whey. I mean, you see guys taking 40, 50 grams of whey protein.
Right.
You still will never get to the same effect as the EAA blend because of the profile of the individual amino acids.
And in the study, you were using 3.6 grams of EAAs versus 15 grams of whey protein.
Correct, and it was...
just from a consumption standpoint, it's much easier to do the EAAs.
Right. Yeah, no doubt about that.
Which leads us to, one of the probably the most significant conclusions in the 25 studies was you really achieved and found the perfect balance. And I like your analogy of how you compared to a football team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of you may be familiar with the branched-chain amino acids or leucine as supplements. They get a lot of play. And we can consider leucine as like the quarterback, because it really is the most important. It's the most abundant amino acid in muscle protein. It's an essential amino acid that not only you need the most leucine to be able to make a muscle protein, because there's more leucine than any other amino acid, but also it has what is called nutraceutical properties. Nutraceutical means a nutrient that kind of has a pharmaceutical action, and that is that it activates the process of protein synthesis. So it's real important. But it's like the quarterback of a football team. You need all the players out there. If you have just all 11 quarterbacks, there's going to be a lot of sacks,
right.
And it's not going to work. And so if you look at the other amino acids, some are more important than others, but they all got to be there. They all have a role. And you may say, well, if you're a wide receiver, they in particular will tell you they're the most important part of the team. But without the guards and tackles, the wide receivers aren't going to
Sure.
have much of a role either. So there may be some that you can point to specific roles that are in addition to their component of protein. But the reality is you need them all. And you need leucine in the most highest abundance because it has this triggering effect to get the whole process going.
My understanding is in the formula, one of the EAAs is only like 1% of the total makeup. Is that correct?
No, I think it's probably the smallest would be methionine, which is about 5%.
Okay, 5%.
Yeah, and the reason that it's low is this is where you have to come to balance. The methionine is important because every protein that is produced, the amino acids are strung along. They're a long string of amino acids hooked together. The first one has to be methionine. So if you don't have an adequate methionine, you never get started. And it has important roles, but it's a sulfur-containing amino acid, which tastes horrible. And one of the things that you find that you have to come to some kind of balance between the optimal formulation and a formulation that people will drink and that will be good enough that you'll still get the effect. It may not be what you would optimally do, but you got to put it all together into a mixture that tastes okay, or else it doesn't do any good if it sits on the table here. Sure. And you look at it and say, well, this would be good if I drink it, but I'm not going to drink it. And unfortunately, that was my mother, was very much that. I would put amino acids in front of her, I'd come back, and about this much was gone later. It just doesn't taste good.
Yeah, I spent a couple days at the Flavor Lab back in Chicago.
I mean, I think we've really made a lot of advances in flavor. Yeah,
no, it's awesome. I love it. Okay, so for time's sake, I'm not going to go into too many more of the individual amino acids. You can get a lot of that information on our website. Let's just talk a little bit about, in the marketplace, we don't really hear anything about essential amino acids, and if you go out and you search on Google, I can not even find more than a handful of products that are using essentials. Most everything out there is non-essential or branched-chain amino acids. It's a very confusing space. What would you say really differentiates, besides the science and the research, what really differentiates the essential amino acid complex that you've helped patent and a lot of the other products out there in the marketplace?
Yes, well, it's a challenge because, of course, until 2006, I never gave marketing a thought. And I really wasn't aware of how big the branched-chain amino acids had become, because the that's really where I started my career at the amino acid supplementation, and showing that they found that they had no beneficial effect, and that was substantiated by some other labs. And now come to find out that it's just a huge product. So, you know, it's a challenge, and I think that this was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, which this is really, it's taken from a Fuller book, which I wrote, trying to explain the whole answer to your question, because it's not a simple answer, and I don't have a ready answer. How does a dietary supplement become so widespread in its use when there's never been a study that actually documents that it has a beneficial effect? And it's a real puzzle to me. But, and I forget the exact numbers, but it's something like 500,000 searches a month on Google for BCAAs and 10,000 a month for EAAs. And so these kind of events of really, as well as the books, of explaining the rationale, the physiological rationale are essential, because I try to work that into any conversation. The point is that education is an important piece of this, because one of the driving forces for, when you say non-essentials, is that they taste much better and they're much cheaper. So if you look at dietary supplements that are protein-based, the most common protein that's in there is collagen, which has almost no nutritional value at all, but it's a protein, and it tastes really good, and it's very cheap. And so they'll list whey protein, maybe soy protein, and collagen may be actually the most abundant protein, because it brings the price down, it improves the taste. And I think that this is a driving factor for a lot of these protein supplements, and they just don't accomplish the goals, the reason you're taking them.
Very interesting. Yeah, we're excited that we're able to partner with you, because that message needs to get out there, because a lot of people really don't understand the difference. Especially, the BCAAs are big in the bodybuilding world and you know, athletics and performance. So we're excited about that. So let's talk a little bit for, you know, athletes. You said you worked with the Olympic Committee. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was consulted with U.S. Swimming for 20 years, actually. And this I go into much more detail in the full book. The training for athletics and the use of EAAs is so specific that it's hard to make a generalization about it when we're talking about you know, athletes training for a specific. I mean, if you think just about football, the difference between a wide receiver and a guard may be 200 pounds. And you know, they have completely different, and that's in the same game. So when you think about all of the different games, but if we just think in global terms, that athletes have fundamentally, they're endurance athletes or they're power or resistance athletes. We call them power athletes. Swimming is a real interesting combination, because muscle strength is clearly an important factor, as well as endurance. So it's almost unique in that. If you look at marathon running, for example, the Olympic winners would be just, I mean, that was the thing that was, I took marathoning quite seriously, and I was maybe 30 pounds lighter than I was when I was a basketball player, and my main distinction was holding the Clydesdale record in the marathon for people over 190 pounds. Because there's nobody over 190 pounds trying to be serious about a marathon.
Right.
You know, they're all like 120
Sure.
pounds. And so there's a lot of dimensions that are important, but so I can't really go through all of them, but the point is that you tailor the workout and the combination of essential amino acids for the particular result you're after. So if you're interested in endurance, you take the amino acids after you've run, because you want to replace the essentials, get a higher muscle protein turnover. If you're really into bodybuilding, you not only take it after exercise, but before exercise, between meals, even in the middle of the night. So that you find that serious bodybuilders will be getting up in the middle of the night and taking nutritional supplements. So there's all kinds of range, but the point is that this is where you know, sport specific and you can, it will always involve essential amino acids, but in a different way depending on the individual sport.
But you believe that essential amino acids definitely can benefit athletes and
Absolutely,
weekend warriors.
Absolutely the key. And the
right.
thing that you really notice if you're a weekend warrior is that it really helps in recovery. Because you're breaking down a lot of the damaged muscle fibers, and you're getting rid of those, and that's what really continues the inflammation. So that, for just recreational athletes, which maybe there's some professional athletes here, but probably only a few, I would guess that if there's any athletes at all, it's that it's going out on the weekend and doing something that you regret on Monday, and
We've all done that.
And the aminos really help in alleviating some of that muscle soreness.
Okay, so I've never taken essential amino acids before I start taking them. How long before I notice the results? If I'm taking the 3.6 grams a day, based on, which is all the research that you've done, right, is around the 3.6, when should I start to notice the results?
Well, I think in terms of recovery and kind of energy, you really can start feeling the effects fairly soon, because by putting the proper balance of essential amino acids, we're actually optimizing the excitatory neurotransmitters in your brain, so that it's not just physical, but you're actually getting an energy boost from your brain. In terms of really starting to see the physiological effects, and the muscle turnover is important for recovery. When you really start seeing the physical energy and more strength, is going to be about a month, depending on how much you take. The 3.6 is an effective dose. If you take that twice a day, you're going to get faster results. And it depends what kind of exercise you're doing. But in general, you're going to start to really feel something within a month, probably sooner. It's really hard to tell, because
depends on the person.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on your level of activity,
Right.
what your other nutrition is, and so forth. But I think that it's pretty darn sure that from the people that we've worked with, that they start noticing something within a month.
And that's pretty quick for a dietary supplement.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for over 20 years, and a lot of supplements you never feel.
Yeah.
You're taking them for preventative reasons, and other supplements it's 90 days to 120 days. So that's really impressive.
And I think that's true. There's not a person sitting in this audience, I'll bet, that can tell me exactly what their muscle protein synthetic rate is.
Probably not.
And if it's to double, you're not going to feel any different.
Right.
The only time you're going to feel different is over time. You're going to start building up more muscle strength and function, and you're going to get a positive result from that.
So this formula has no additives, preservatives. It's a vegan formula. Is it safe? Is there any known adverse effects?
Yeah, well, there's a government sort of acronym called GRAS, or generally regarded as safe, which is these amino acids all fall into that category. Really more important to me is the fact that the National Academy of Science did an in-detail study of all the literature on all amino acid supplementation, and came away with the notion that there's no evidence for any adverse effects at any dosage of amino acids. So that this is one of the major things that is so important to realize, that there is no indication, there's never been an adverse effect, with the exception of certain genetic diseases that you don't live past, like there's a disease called maple syrup urine disease, which you don't live past the age of 6 months, where you can't metabolize leucine. But if you don't have some genetic disease which is going to be identified by the time you're a year old, there really is no known adverse effects. So that's really the heart of why I feel so strongly about this being an important advance, because you can get these physiological benefits without any adverse effects. And if you think about drugs, realize that in the first place, to get FDA approval, you only have to have 60% of people taking it show the positive effect. So 40% don't even have to have the positive effect. And in these nutritional studies, there has never been a study where everyone hasn't gone in the same direction, so that it's possible to achieve 100% responsiveness. The second point about drug trials is realize that the reason they do so many thousands of subjects is because they know there are going to be adverse effects, but they don't even know what they're going to be. So they have to do thousands and thousands of studies of individuals to be able to know what are the adverse effects. And we know how many cases have we seen of drugs where the adverse effects has been discovered years after people have been taking it. And we know now this is a totally safe formulation. We have no risk of adverse effects. And in that sense, we also know that there may be some individual variation in the magnitude of effects. A lot of that depends on your lifestyle, but that it will impact every person that takes it. At least the research certainly substantiates that.
Well, Dr. Wolfe, we're at the end of our time. Is there any final comments that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, hopefully there'll be some questions. It's never possible for me to fully anticipate what people wonder about. My own interests are so focused that I can't often relate to what other people are wondering about. So that's why
we went a little longer than anticipated. Okay. So want to do a couple minutes. Any questions out here? We got a couple of questions. Why don't up here in the back? Let's take 5 minutes and then we'll close the event here.
I'm reluctant to really make a big recommendation. We have done studies in children with cystic fibrosis with EAAs with tremendous results. But that's a little different story because they have trouble with digestion and the EAAs are totally and freely absorbed. I think with a dosage of 3.6, there's no reason to be worried at all. We did studies in severely burned children that showed tremendous benefits. But the reason I say I'm a little reluctant that I would be cautious is just because in very young, babies, that the amino acid and protein requirements are less than they are as you get older. So that I think that it would be a beneficial effect, but I don't want to make a strong recommendation till we get some data in young children because it makes great sense. But I'm just a little cautious because of the fact that if you take a neonatal formula, it's much lower protein than as you get older.
Okay, we have a lot of questions here. We're going to take just a couple more because we want to respect your time and get you out of here. So let's take one here from the gentleman in the blue shirt on the left.
Are there benefits that you could talk about for using EAAs for someone who already has diabetes?
Absolutely. We have done studies showing improvement in insulin sensitivity with EAAs. And it involves a few mechanisms, but most importantly, in increasing the ability of the muscle to clear glucose from the blood and increasing insulin sensitivity. So that's been published in a couple of different studies.
Let's do one more in the back there. The gentleman, the second to the last row.
So you said there's no indication of adverse effects at any dosage recognizable. So is there a dosage where there's no more effects?
Right. That's a great question. We have looked at dose response. And this is why I said that 3.6 is an effective dose, but you do get a bigger effect up to a 15-gram dose, but no more after that. So that you would never want to exceed that. I think that the 15-gram dosage is going to be the range that if you're really doing serious bodybuilding, because it's going to be less effective than 2 3.6-gram doses per gram that you eat, if you know what I mean. The percentage increase, you're going to get double the muscle built than you take with 3.6-gram dosage. When you get to 15 grams, it's not going to be as effective, but it's more. So you're going to get more of an effect, but you do max out. So you wouldn't want to ever go beyond that in any single dose.
So I got another one here from the gentleman in the yellow
Question,
shirt.
would it be best when I work out every day in the gym, and should I take it without food, or should I take it with food, the EAA?
The best, and we've researched the specific timing, and the best way to do this is to take it half an hour before you start your workout, if you want to, throughout the workout, and then immediately following the workout. and this is going to give you much more of an effect. The problem with the food, well, it can punch up the protein value of your food, of your meal, but you're going to get more benefit on an empty stomach and right before and after the workout.
Let's do a few more.
Are there any contraindications with any medications?
Now, this is a nutrient. This is the essential nutrients in the body. And in fact, what you usually find is that the beneficial effect of some nutrients are amplified. And in fact, one of the things that's an interesting story here is that there's a drug, there's been an effort to develop a drug to combat the loss of muscle with aging or sarcopenia. This has been going on at every major pharmaceutical company for the last 20 years. And I've told them over and over and over again, it's never going to work if you don't couple it with essential amino acids, because the drug alone is not enough. And that's why you don't see anything on the market, despite billions of dollars that have been spent. This is not it's not a drug, so that it can be taken with any kind of drug that you're consuming.
Get this gentleman over here in the middle. Get in the middle section here with the black shirt.
So I know you mentioned branched-chain amino acids, the studies on those. If your protein intake is adequate, they don't really have much effect. If somebody's eating, say, something like 4,000 calories, they're very active, and they're eating like 200 grams of protein per day, that's still not an adequate amount to get benefits that would come with the essential amino acids. What makes it different than the branched chains?
Well,
as far
the
as
key, the concept behind the branch chains is to activate the molecular processes in the muscle that will increase your protein synthesis. It's really a redundancy with if you're working out, because the workout's going to do the same thing. This is why you see such a bigger effect when you take the aminos after workout than before. So the point is that the analogy with the football team, that the branch chain might be the quarterback and the wide receiver and the running back, but you got to have all the others. You need all amino acids to make a complete protein. Now your question is, can you get enough from eating enough protein? And what we see is, there are a lot of big guys who have never eaten the amino acids. So at some point, if you're dedicated enough to eat enough protein, you can get as big as you want to get. It's just really hard. There's a video that Dwayne Johnson made when he was getting ready to play Hercules. And he felt like he wasn't already big enough, so he needed to get bigger. And this program shows what he did in his 7 meals a day, laid out on this huge table, and every one had like a 20-ounce steak or a 15-ounce fillet of fish. And it was almost 600 grams of protein a day. So, if you're going to do that, you're going to get enough amino acids. It's just not a very practical way to go about doing it.
Sounds very expensive.
Well, you got to have your own chef.
All right, we'd love to take more questions, but we need to bring. First of all, please give Dr. Wolfe a round of applause. Thank you very much. Excellent. Well done.